What happens when the loudest voice in heavy metal finally goes silent? For more than half a century, Ozzy Osbourne lived louder, wilder, and messier than almost anyone in music history. He wasn't just a frontman, he was chaos personified, a living paradox of vulnerability and danger, comedy and tragedy, survival and destruction. He rose from the gritty, industrial streets of Birmingham, England, a kid from a poor family who could barely read or write, and became one of the most famous and infamous performers on the planet. His voice helped invent heavy metal, his antics made headlines around the world, and his sheer resilience turned him into something bigger than a star. He became a myth. But myths don't last forever. In July 2025, Ozzy's story finally came to an end. Just 17 days after his final performance, he was gone, 76 years old. And the way it happened left fans shocked, devastated, and asking the question, did Ozzy Osbourne write his own ending? July 5th, 2025. Birmingham, the birthplace of heavy metal, the city where four working-class kids once plugged in their instruments and changed music forever. And on this night, it was where their wildest, most notorious son was returning for one last bow. Back to the beginning. That was the name of the show, and fans understood what it meant. This wasn't just nostalgia, it was closure. When Ozzy stepped onto the stage, frail but defiant, time seemed to freeze. His movements were slow, his body clearly worn from decades of punishment, surgeries, and illness. But when he grabbed the microphone, the transformation was instant. The years melted away. That unmistakable voice cut through the air like thunder. He sang with everything he had left: War Pigs, Iron Man, Crazy Train. Songs that had once terrified parents and inspired teenagers to defy the world now rang out like a farewell sermon. Some fans swore they saw tears in his eyes. Others said they felt a strange calm in his presence, like he knew this was truly the end. It wasn't just a concert, it was a ritual, a goodbye dressed in fire and sound. The Prince of Darkness, saying his last words in the city where it all began. 17 days. That's all it took for history to turn cruel. On July 22nd, the world woke up to headlines they didn't want to believe. Ozzy Osbourne, dead at 76. The shock was universal. Fans, journalists, even other rock icons were stunned. After all, Ozzy had been called indestructible for decades. He'd survived addiction, overdoses, accidents, and illnesses. He once crashed an ATV and nearly died. He lived with Parkinson's, endured brutal surgeries on his neck and spine, and still, somehow, found ways back to the stage. People had joked for years. The world could end. Cockroaches and Ozzy would be the only survivors. And yet, here it was. The immortal Prince of Darkness was gone, and the timing was impossible to ignore. A final farewell show, followed by death less than 3 weeks later. Fans asked, was it fate, coincidence, or had Ozzy himself orchestrated the ultimate ending to his story? The world was still in mourning when the unthinkable happened. Roger Waters, Pink Floyd's notorious mastermind, made comments dismissing Ozzy's career, mocking him as more circus act than serious artist. It was salt in a fresh wound. Fans were outraged, rock forums lit up, social media exploded, and then came Jack Osbourne. Ozzy's son went nuclear. His message to Waters was raw, brutal, and unfiltered. A son defending his father's honor with every ounce of fire in his blood. His words echoed across platforms, sharp, furious, unforgettable. Suddenly, Ozzy's death wasn't just about grief. It became about legacy. Was he the stumbling, swearing dad from reality TV, or was he one of the most important musicians in rock history? The truth, as always with Ozzy, was both. And maybe that's why the world loved him so much, because he was messy, flawed, real. He wasn't some untouchable god. He was human, and yet larger than life. One day before his death, Ozzy left the world with a final message online. At the time, it seemed like a simple thank you, but now it feels haunting. "It's been one hell of a ride," he wrote. 7 words, nothing more, but they carried the weight of a lifetime. Fans now pore over those words, dissecting them like sacred text. Was it just a reflection after the farewell show? Or did Ozzy know his time was ending, and this was his way of saying goodbye? For a man who had shocked the world countless times, his final words were understated. No theatrics, no scandal, just gratitude. Perhaps in the end, that was Ozzy's greatest twist. But Ozzy wouldn't be Ozzy without one last strange twist. Just weeks before his death, he unveiled one of the most bizarre projects of his career, collaborating with chimpanzees on abstract expressionist paintings. Yes, chimpanzees. Together they splashed paint onto canvases, creating wild bursts of color that blurred the line between joke and genius. Critics argued endlessly. Some dismissed it as nonsense, others hailed it as primal brilliance. But isn't that what Ozzy always did? Blur the lines between madness and genius? He made people argue. He forced attention. He lived in that space where you couldn't quite tell if he was serious or insane. And maybe that's why it felt so fitting that his final artistic project involved paint, primates, and chaos. Ozzy's death wasn't the end of his story. Almost immediately, his family and industry insiders confirmed that projects were on the way. A documentary chronicling his final chapter, posthumous memoirs based on his recordings and notes, even rumors of a Hollywood film adaptation. For a man who spent his life performing, even his death was becoming a stage. His myth was only growing larger. Younger generations, who only knew him from MTV, would now discover the darker, wilder, groundbreaking chapters of his story. His chaos was being immortalized, in books, in films, in music that will outlive us all. The world's farewell was as wild and unpredictable as Ozzy himself. In Birmingham, thousands filled the streets, turning the city into a massive open-air memorial. In Los Angeles, Hollywood Boulevard shut down for candlelight vigils. In Tokyo, fans blasted Crazy Train on subway speakers. In South America, entire neighborhoods painted murals overnight. His funeral was private, but the planet turned it into a global festival. Rock bands across genres dedicated shows to him. Radio stations played his songs for hours straight. Social feeds became endless collages of his craziest moments. And the tone was unique. People didn't just cry, they laughed. They remembered the bat, the dove, the endless profanity, the confused yet lovable dad on reality TV. The world understood something important. To honor Ozzy, you couldn't just mourn, you had to celebrate the madness. Ozzy Osbourne wasn't just a musician, he was a cultural force. From the moment Black Sabbath unleashed their first heavy riffs in 1970, Ozzy became the face of a new kind of rebellion, one darker, heavier, and scarier than anything rock had seen before. Parents tried to ban his music, religious groups called him dangerous, and politicians labeled him a threat to society. And that resistance only made him more powerful. He turned controversy into fuel. Every protest, every headline, every scandal made him bigger. By the 1980s, he wasn't just a rock singer, he was the living symbol of heavy metal itself. His image, the cross necklaces, the wild eyes, the unhinged laugh, became an archetype copied by thousands of bands that followed. And then, just when people thought his story was over, he reinvented himself again. In the early 2000s, the Osbournes reality show introduced him to an entirely new generation. Kids who had never heard Paranoid suddenly knew Ozzy as the swearing, confused dad who somehow stumbled his way through daily life. It made him a household name once again, proving that his cultural impact went far beyond music. Ozzy's legacy is unique because it exists on so many levels. To some, he was the godfather of metal. To others, he was a pop culture icon, a walking meme decades before memes existed. And to millions of fans, he was proof that you could be broken, messy, flawed, and still unforgettable. Even after his death, his shadow stretches into every corner of music, fashion, film, and television. The Prince of Darkness didn't just change rock, he changed culture itself. Ozzy Osbourne's story was never neat. It was chaos wrapped in brilliance, comedy wrapped in tragedy, humanity wrapped in myth. He was the voice of rebellion, the terror of parents, the hero of misfits, and the proof that survival itself can become an art form. Now, with his death, the legend is sealed. His name belongs to history, but his echo will keep shaking arenas, headphones, and hearts for generations. The Prince of Darkness has left the stage, but his shadow stretches across time, daring us all to live a little louder, a little wilder, a little freer. Because if Ozzy taught us anything, it's this: life is short, rules are fragile, and the only way to truly live is to embrace the madness.